Hello and welcome to highlights of Stage 9 of the Tour de France on GCN Racing. A quick recap of yesterday before we get stuck into today, and we saw an incredible display of strength from Thomas de Gendt, who spent a total of 3 seconds of the stage in the peloton and another 5 hours 15 minutes out front. He held off not just the motivated pack, but even a late move from Thibaut Pinot and Julien Alaphilippe. Consolation for the latter was reclaiming the yellow jersey from the shoulders of Giulio Ciccone. Today's stage could offer similar racing, slightly shorter than yesterday at 170 k's, travelling westerly from Saint-Étienne to Brioude. Like yesterday, it's also very, very hilly. A first cat climb early on, and then 2 third categories. If you look closely though, there is hardly an inch of flat over the whole stage. It again looked like one for the breakaway. Not that yesterday's winner Thomas de Gendt seemed remotely interested in that, although data nerds will understand the fatigue in his legs when you hear that he averaged 311 watts for over 5 hours. He had clearly inspired a lot of other riders though. A big group of 14 emerged at the front. There were no dangerous riders in there for the general classification, so the bunch was happy to let them go, but that's not to say that they were also rans. Far from it, there were some seriously strong riders with some big victories among them right there. For example, Jasper Stuyven, Daryl Impey, Edvald Boasson Hagen, Thijs Benoot, Simon Clark, Oliver Naesen and Tony Martin. Marc Soyer from Movistar defied the roadblock behind and then had a very, very tough 20-kilometre chase to get on terms, eventually joining up with the breakaway on the first cat climb of the Mur d'Arec-sur-Loire. Thijs Benoot took maximum points over the top, but just behind there was another rider trying to get on terms. Former world champion Rui Costa had made a similar move to Soyer, but agonisingly had to give up when in sight of the breakaway and then rejoin the peloton. And that's a big shame for him because, as you can see from the gap to the bunch, it now looks very much like the day's winner would come from these 15 riders. A group that size though would never be happy to stay together to contest the finish, and fireworks started with 60 k's to go. No one was quite able to get the gap there though, and an uneasy truce resumed for another 20 k's. When Lukas Posselberger slipped clear, the former national champ of Austria and a stage winner at the Giro d'Italia put his head down and forged on, getting a gap of 40 seconds at one point, but there was a whole load of attacking behind in the breakaway, sending Boasson Hagen and Tony Martin out the back among several others. Eventually, a group of Naesen, Tratnik, Soyer, Impey, Stuyven and Benoot all hit the final 3.4 kilometre long climb together and then quickly caught and dropped Posselberger. Thijs Benoot drove on, taking Nico Roach with him and Jan Tratnik just behind. He was ultimately dropped from them though. Daryl Impey looked like he was a little bit cooked, but then launches across a yawning gap to bridge almost in an instant to Nico Roach and Thijs Benoot. Behind, Soyer, Tratnik, Stuyven and Naesen formed the second group on the road, before Thijs Benoot then attacked again, taking Impey with him but dropping Roach. And in spite of their mismatched sprinting ability, Impey having the edge you'd think, they began to work well together to stay clear of even quicker sprinters contained in that second group. Now back in the peloton, let's not forget them. Local boy Romain Bardet did spark some action, attacking on the final climb and taking Richie Porte and George Bennett with him. However, Team Ineos were quick to spot the danger and snuffed it out. Back at the sharp end, and it looked like we'd have a 2-up sprint as the gap stayed at around 15 seconds. Impey was forced to ride on the front for the last couple of kilometres, but he kept the pace nice and high. Benoot launched with 220 metres to go. It gets ahead of Impey, but that is short-lived. Daryl Impey kicked and took his maiden Tour de France stage victory. He has worn the yellow jersey before, but this one would be oh so sweet. We don't have to wait long before the second group arrives, and Jan Tratnik took the third place finish on the stage, just ahead of Naesen, Stuyven and Roach just behind. Daryl Impey here receiving the plaudits from his team, undoubtedly the biggest moment in what's already an incredibly solid career for him, and that's got to be a great boost of morale for his Mitchelton Scott team as well. Confirmation then of the results on what is a cracking day of racing at the Tour de France. Impey from Benoot just ahead of Tratnik, Naesen, Stuyven, Roach Soyer, and then we have to wait another minute 50. The bunch all rolled in en masse, 16.5 minutes behind, which means that we won't have seen any change in the general classification. Alaphilippe then has the yellow jersey for another day ahead of Giulio Ciccone. Thibaut Pinot best placed of the big hitters behind. Now tomorrow is going to be a shock for the riders. The second Monday of the race is almost always the first rest day, but this year they have one more stage to go until they can put their feet up. Shouldn't be too troublesome though. 217 k's from Saint-Flour to Albi, undulating, not too hilly, a perfect day for the breakaway, but could also be one for the sprinters perhaps. At this stage, maybe it'll just depend on tiredness or motivation. Find out how it pans out by watching live with our mates at Eurosport, and also subscribe to GCN Racing if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon so you get a notification of our highlights just after the stage finish.